Welcome back to the deep dive. It is Sunday, February 8th, 2026. Usually on this show, we act as your filter for the present. We take the noise of the news cycle, the fires, the elections, the market crashes, and, we try to find the signal.
But today we're doing something a little different.
Very different. We aren't looking at what is happening, we're looking at a blueprint for what could happen.
Yeah, a detailed one.
Exactly. We were staring down the barrel of what the sociologists and economists are calling the polycrisis. It's become a bit of a buzzword, but it feels very real, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It's the sense that all the problems are hitting at once and they're all feeding each other.
Right. You have climate acceleration moving faster than even the 2020 models predicted. You have AI and biotech just tearing through labor markets faster than any government can possibly legislate for.
And underneath all of that, you have this crushing economic inequality that is just, well, it's dissolving the glue of society. It's dissolving trust in our institutions.
It feels like the engine of the world is redlining.
It does, doesn't it? And the dashboard is flashing all these warning lights that we don't even have names for yet. The consensus among the authors of the documents we're looking at today is that the old operating systems are forms of government. They're just incompatible with the new hardware of the 21st century.
And the terrifying part isn't just the problems themselves, it's that our tools for fixing them feel broken. You look at liberal democracy, and it just feels gridlocked.
Completely. It's trapped in these short-term election cycles where politicians can't think past the next midterm election, let alone the next generation.
Then you look at authoritarianism, and it's just so brittle. It's terrified of the truth, so it suppresses the very innovation you need to solve complex problems.
And the third option, market fundamentalism. The idea that the market will solve everything. It just can't seem to price in the end of the world. It's an externality it can't calculate.
So that is the premise of this huge stack of documents we're diving into today. The core argument is that the 20th century architectures of governance, liberal democracy, market fundamentalism, authoritarianism, they're just exhausting.
They aren't crashing because of bad drivers, is the argument. They're crashing because the road has changed. The world has changed.
So we have this proposal. And it is heavy. It's dense. We've got a full constitutional framework, a hierarchy-explained manual, technical documents on competency exams.
In a massive 30-year case study applied to a real country, Pakistan. It's called Meritocratic Social Dirigism, or MSD.
It is a mouthful.
It really is.
It is probably the least sexy name for a revolution I have ever heard. It sounds like a dissertation title that got rejected by a committee.
It absolutely does. But if you can get past the branding, what it's proposing is a fourth architecture. It's not trying to patch the old systems. It's trying to build a new one from first principles.
And the hook that got me, the thing that made me actually read all, 800 pages of this, was the preamble. Just one sentence. It says, "Designed for humans as they are, not as you wish they were."
I highlighted that exact same line. It's aggressively anti-utopian.
Completely. It throws out the idea that if we just educate everyone perfectly, democracy will work. Or if we just find the perfect strongman, a benevolent dictator, that will work.
It says, no, let's assume humans are what they are. We're biased, we're tribal, we're emotional, we're often short-sighted, and yes, sometimes we're greedy. And it asks, how do you build a machine that produces good outcomes using those flawed parts?
It calls this approach pragmatic pluralism.
Which is a key concept. We'll unpack that.
Okay, so before we get into the gears, and we are going to get into the gears, including the actual math questions they want to use to pick government ministers, let's break down that terrible acronym. MSD. Meritocratic. Social. Dirigisme.
Let's do it. So meritocratic, this is the engine. It means that the technical side of governance, managing the power grid, planning a pandemic response, navigating economic complexity, is run by people selected for proven competence.
Not elected by popularity.
Not appointed because of wealth or connections. They have to be tested.
So the immediate fear, and I had it too, is an IQ test to run the country. Rule by nerds.
That's the knee-jerk fear, and it's a valid one to have. But as we'll see when we get into the details of their testing framework, the NCAF, it's as much about testing for ethical resilience and practical capability as it is about raw intelligence.
So it's about making sure the person in charge of building the bridge actually understands physics.
At a bare minimum, yes. Yeah. Okay, second word, social.
This is the floor.
This is the foundation. It refers to a social covenant, essentially universal basic services. The argument is that you cannot have a stable society, or a truly free market for that matter, if a huge portion of your population is terrified of starving or losing their homes or getting sick.
So it's not a safety net you might fall into. It's a concrete foundation you stand on.
That's a great way to put it. And the third word, dirigisme. This is the one that sounds French.
Because it is French.
It is. It's an economic term, often used in development economics. It doesn't mean communism.
Yeah.
The state doesn't own the shoe factory or the bakery.
But it doesn't mean laissez-faire either.
Exactly. It means strategic guidance. The state sets the direction, the big missions. We are transitioning to a renewable energy grid, or we are ending child poverty, and then it uses market mechanisms and private enterprise to get there. It steers the ship. It doesn't row the boat.
Okay, so that's the elevator pitch. Meritocracy for competence, social guarantees for stability, and dirigism for direction. But, I mean, the devil is always in the details.
Always.
Let's walk into the engine room. Section 1, the philosophy and the legislature. You mentioned pragmatic pluralism. To me, that sounds like a fancy way of saying, we'll just do whatever works.
That's actually not a bad summary. That's exactly what it means. The core insight here is that different types of problems require different types of cognitive tools. The document uses this great analogy of a toolbox.
Okay.
If you have a technical problem, like how do we build a nuclear reactor that doesn't melt down? Or how do we efficiently distribute a vaccine during a pandemic? You don't want to hold a vote.
Right. I don't want to poll Twitter to decide on the tensile strength of steel beams. I want an engineer. I want someone who knows the answer.
Exactly. For that problem, you need the tool of expertise. That's the meritocratic part. But, and this is crucial, if you have a value conflict like, should we build that nuclear reactor at all if it means destroying a historically significant indigenous site? The engineer has no special authority there.
That's a moral question, not a technical one.
It's a question of what we value as a society. For that, you need the people. You need democracy. That's the right tool for that job.
And if you need to determine the price of the electricity the reactor produces,
then you probably want the market. You want supply and demand to figure that out. The problem, MSD argues, is that we keep using the wrong tools for the job. We use markets to solve climate change, which fails because the market is terrible at pricing in long-term externalities.
Or we use politics to solve epidemiology.
Which, as we've seen, gets a lot of people killed. MSD is all about trying to unbundle these problems and assign the right mechanism to the right problem type.
Okay, but here is the trap. And I know our listeners are screaming this at their speakers right now. If you say, we need experts, the immediate, obvious question is, who picks the experts?
The billion-dollar question.
Because if the current elites get to pick the experts, you just get a self-perpetuating oligarchy. You get the old boys club, but now they all have a PhD. It's the same system with different label.
This is the selection paradox. Who selects the selectors? If you don't solve this, the whole system collapses into a closed loop of power. And MSD has a solution for this. And it is honestly the most radical part of the entire proposal.
Go on.
They suggest that to break the cycle of elite capture, you have to inject true statistical randomness into the system.
Randomness, like rolling dice.
Pretty much. They propose that for the very first batch of selectors, what they call Generation Zero, the people who set up the initial competency exams, they should be chosen by a lottery, a civic lottery.
Just pick people out of a hat, basically.
A very sophisticated, demographically weighted hat. But yes, the idea is to break the historical chain of power. And then for the legislature itself, they bake this randomness in permanently.
This is the sortition concept.
Exactly. So they propose a single legislative chamber, no House and Senate creating gridlock, just one assembly of 300 people. But it's the split that's fascinating. It's 60-40.
Right. I have the chart here. 60%, that's 180 seats, are elected in the normal way. That's standard democracy. I vote for the representative in my district. If the roads are bad, I can yell at her.
And that part is crucial. It provides local representation. It provides accountability. You still have someone you can vote out. But the other 40%, the other 120 seats, are filled by sortition.
Which means, explain that.
It means it works just like jury duty. Every adult citizen is in a national pool. A computer runs an algorithm, and it's stratified so it matches the census data for age, gender, region, education level, income brackets, and it spits out 120 names.
So you could be, what, a plumber in Ohio? You open your mail one day and it says, congratulations, you are now a member of the Legislative Assembly for the next 2 years.
That is literally how it works.
I have to be honest, my immediate gut reaction is terror. Just pure terror. I think about the guy who lives down the hall from me. I think about the comments section on any news article. Do I want those people writing the laws of the land?
That is the instinctive reaction. I had it too. We are trained to think that governance requires special people, professional politicians. But the MSD documents argue that those special people are precisely the problem.
How so?
Professional politicians are hyperpartisan. They spend half their time fundraising. Their thinking is dominated by the next election cycle. And they are incredibly susceptible to lobbyists and elite capture. A random nurse or a mechanic or a retired teacher, they have one job:
What's that?
to look at a proposed law and use their life experience to ask a simple question. Is this good for people like me and my community? They are the common sense filter.
And they can't be reelected, right? That's a key detail.
A critical detail. It's a single 2-year, non-renewable term. And during that time, they are legally barred from being members of any political party. They can't be whipped into voting a certain way.
So their only loyalty is to their own conscience.
That's the idea. It
Yeah.
effectively breaks the party whip system, because how can a party boss control a random, constantly changing sample of the population? You can't.
It's an interesting check on power. You have the professional politicians who know how the game is played, and then you have this solid block of 120 normal people who can just stand up and say, hold on, this doesn't make any sense to me.
It reminds me of ancient Athenian democracy. They used lottery, sortition for almost everything. They believed it was the purest form of democracy because it protected the state from the ambitions of the powerful.
The MSD documents say it restores the citizen to citizenship. It's not just about voting once every 4 years. It's about the very real possibility of actually being asked to serve.
A duty, not just a right.
But how do they actually pass laws? I'm just picturing a room of 300 people, 120 of whom have zero legal or policy training, and it just seems like it could become a chaotic shouting match.
The framework is obsessed with process. You can't just show up and write a bill on the back of a napkin. Every proposed law has to go through 3 formal stages.
Okay, what are they?
Stage 1 is technical analysis. Before a bill is even debated on the floor, the nonpartisan expert bodies, the Meritocrats, have to score it.
Score it how? What are they looking for?
A full cost-benefit analysis, a detailed environmental impact assessment, a review for constitutional compliance. They produce a neutral fact sheet that every member of the assembly gets. So you can't have a politician stand up and say, this tax cut will pay for itself, if the independent analysis says it will add $2 trillion to the debt.
The math is on the table before the talking starts.
It establishes a shared factual reality,
Yeah.
which,
That alone would solve about half the arguments in Washington or London or any other capital right now.
right. Then, stage 2, public deliberation. They use modern digital platforms, sort of like town halls, but online, to get citizen feedback on the specifics of the bill, not just the general vibes.
At stage 3.
Stage 3 is the legislative debate and the final vote in the assembly. And this is where the elected politicians and the sortition members work together.
There's a specific mechanism in this stage that I just loved. It's called trade-off transparency.
This is brilliant. This should be a law everywhere today.
It basically makes it illegal for a politician to use the phrase win-win.
Essentially, yes. It mandates that every single piece of legislation must have a trade-off statement attached directly to its preamble. It's not buried in an appendix, it's right at the top.
And it has to explicitly list 3 things.
Who benefits from this law? Who pays the cost or is negatively affected? And what are the known risks and downsides?
So if you want to pass a law to protect a forest, you have to write right there in the bill. This will save 1,000 acres of critical biodiversity and act as a carbon sink. However, it will also cost an estimated 500 logging jobs in the region and reduce local tax revenue by 12% in the short term.
And if you are found to have deliberately lied or misled on that trade-off statement, the law can be struck down as unconstitutional. It forces honesty.
It treats the voters like adults who can actually handle complexity and bad news.
It completely undermines the populist playbook, which relies on promising everything to everyone for free, with no downsides.
That is deeply refreshing. And also a little depressing that it sounds so radical. Okay, so that's the legislature, a kind of hybrid brain. Now let's talk about the hands, the executive branch. And if I'm looking for the president or the prime minister in this org chart, I'm not finding one.
You won't. The MSD philosophy is aggressively, fundamentally anti-strongman. They look at the presidential model, whether it's in the US, France, Russia, wherever, and they see a single point of failure.
How so?
One person's ego, one person's health crisis, one person's bad judgment, one person's bias can crash the entire system. It concentrates too much power and too much risk in one human being.
So they decapitate the executive.
They don't decapitate it, they They broaden it. They diffuse the power. They propose a collegial executive council, a council of 7 to 9 members who hold executive power jointly.
Like the Swiss model.
It's very similar to the Swiss Federal Council, yes. Now, there's a chief executive in the Pakistan case study. They call this role the Rais-e-Hukumat, the head of government. But look at the fine print. What can they actually do alone?
It says, here they are, first among equals. They coordinate council meetings. They represent the nation at the UN. They shake hands with foreign leaders. They are the face of the nation. But they have no veto power over the council. They cannot fire the other ministers unilaterally. They cannot issue executive orders that override a council decision. They are a facilitator, not a commander-in-chief.
All major decisions, going to war, signing a treaty, passing a budget, require a majority vote of the council. It forces consensus.
So who are the other people on this council? Are they all elected?
No, and this is where the meritocracy comes roaring back in. A majority of the council are what they call directors. The economic director, the social director, the ecological director, the director of infrastructure. And these are not political jobs.
You can't get this job because you're a major party donor or because you helped win an election.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
To even be considered for the role of economic director, you have to pass the highest level of the National Competency Assessment Framework for economics. You have to be a proven expert in your field.
The NCAF, again, we have to dive deep on that in a minute. But wait, there is one more seat on this council, and it's the weirdest one of all, the citizen representative.
Yes. So in the room where the highest level decisions are made, decisions about nuclear codes, pandemic responses, national budgets, there's one seat at the table reserved for a randomly selected citizen.
Just a normal person, pulled from the lottery, sitting next to the PhD in macroeconomics and the general.
A normal person, a baker, a dentist, a truck driver, chosen by lottery for a single one-year term.
Why? I mean, my first thought is that seems dangerous. What do they contribute?
The documents call it the ultimate check on groupthink and expert blindness. Experts, especially when they're all in a room together, tend to develop tunnel vision. They talk in jargon, they get lost in their models, they can abstract away the human suffering behind their decisions.
So the citizen rep is there to ground the conversation.
They're there to be the child in the emperor's new clothes. Their official role is to ask the simple, powerful questions. Wait, can someone explain this to me in plain English? How does this policy actually help a single mother in the suburbs? Why does this cost so much?
They are the reality check.
They are the human-level reality check. And because the council makes decisions by majority vote, say, 5 out of 7, the chief executive and the directors have to convince the normal person. If you can't explain your policy to an intelligent layperson, it's probably a bad, overly complicated policy.
I like that. It forces clarity and accountability right at the very top. Okay, you've mentioned this test a few times, the NCAF, the big exam you have to pass to be an expert director. I really want to dig into this because meritocracy can be a very dirty word these days.
It is. For a lot of people, it's just become a code word for privilege.
Right. Usually merit just ends up meaning my parents could afford to send me to Harvard. How does this MSD system avoid that trap? How does it prevent it from just becoming a new kind of aristocracy?
The documentation is very, very aware of this critique. They spend a whole chapter on it. They explicitly state that the NCIF is designed to measure capability, not just credential. It doesn't care where you went to school or if you went to school at all. It only cares about what you can do right now in a simulated, high-pressure environment.
So let's look at the weighting of the exam score. I've got it here. 40% is technical competence. Do you know the material? 20% is practical performance. Have you ever actually built something or run a team? 15% is interpersonal skills. Can you communicate and work with others?
But look at that last one. 25%, a full quarter of the final score, is ethical reasoning.
This is the game changer.
And it's everything. They are looking for smart sociopaths. The documents argue we have plenty of those in positions of power right now. They are trying to select for people who have demonstrated what they call ethical backbone.
Let's get specific. I'm looking at the sample question from the Senior Director Examination Manual. This is question 4, the health minister scenario.
Read it out. It's brutal. It's designed to be.
Okay. It says, you are the social director with a fixed, unchangeable health budget of $3 million for a specific program. You have 3 options. Option A, fund a new surgical procedure that will completely cure 100 people of a debilitating disease. It costs $1 million. Option B, fund a palliative treatment that will relieve severe symptoms for 500 people, but will cure no one. It also costs $1 million. Option C, fund a preventative public health campaign that will prevent 10,000 young people from ever developing the disease, but the full effects won't be seen for 10 years. How do you allocate the $3 million?
And you can't just pick one. The prompt requires you to write out your justification using three distinct ethical frameworks. Utilitarianism, which is about maximizing total good or happiness.
Ralston justice, which argues for prioritizing the needs of the worst-off members of society.
And the capability approach, which focuses on whether people have the real opportunity to live a life they value.
So if my answer is just, I'll cure the 100 people because that's the most decisive outcome, I fail the question.
You fail, because that answer shows no cognitive complexity. You have to demonstrate that you understand the tragedy of the choice. You have to acknowledge who you are choosing not to help. They are testing to see if you can hold two or three competing ethical values in your head at the same time without your brain snapping.
It's not about finding the right answer. It's about showing you understand the weight of the question.
Precisely. There's another one here, a situational judgment test. You're an infrastructure director. A major bridge project you're overseeing is falling behind schedule and is over budget. The lead contractor is owned by the brother-in-law of the chief executive. The contractor is asking for more money and a deadline extension. The question is just, what do you do?
That's the backbone test.
That's what they call it. And if your answer is something like, I would try to find a compromise that satisfies all parties, you probably fail. They are actively filtering for the candidate who says, I halt the project, I order an independent safety financial audit, and I formally report the conflict of interest, even if it costs me my job.
They're trying to select for integrity under pressure. It's incredibly ambitious. But again, I have to ask, who grades these exams? Because if I'm the grader, I'm the new kingmaker. I can just fail the people I don't like politically.
That's the anti-bias protocol. The manual specifies a multi-stage process. First, the initial grading is completely blind. No names, no demographics, just a candidate number. For the technical sections, they use open-source scoring algorithms, so anyone can check the code for bias.
And for the ethical questions, that's subjective.
It is. So for those, they use a panel of multiple graders from diverse backgrounds, and they have to reach a consensus. Plus, and this is important, they have diversity targets for the output. If the pool of candidates who pass the exam is, say, 90% male from one specific region, the system flags itself for review. It assumes the failure is in the recruitment pipeline or the test itself, not in the candidates.
Okay, so we've built the machine. We have the lottery legislature, the collegial executive, and the exam-passed experts. Now, what does this machine actually do? Section 4, the economy.
This is where we get to the dirigism part of the name.
Strategic economic dirigism. The document says it rejects the false binary of, quote, soul-crushing state socialism versus heartless laissez-faire capitalism.
It argues that that's a 20th century debate, and it's obsolete. It says capitalism is a fantastic tool for some things, like making innovative smartphones and great coffee shops, and a terrible, disastrous tool for other things, like healthcare, prisons, and basic infrastructure.
And socialism is great at ensuring equity, but can be terrible at driving innovation and efficiency.
So MSD says, don't choose, use both. The key is distinguishing between consumer goods and public goods.
Explain that distinction.
For consumer goods sneakers, video games, restaurants, cars, let the market rip. Competition, innovation, consumer choice, that's all great. The state should not be in the business of designing sneakers.
Agreed. State-run sneakers are always ugly.
Always. But for public goods, and they define this as healthcare, housing, transit, education, water, energy, the market is the wrong tool. The profit motive in those areas creates perverse incentives.
It makes it profitable to keep people sick, or to deny them housing, or to provide low-quality education.
Exactly. So in those core sectors, the state takes the lead. It acts as the primary guarantor and provider, using private contractors where efficient, but setting the standards and the prices.
But there is a massive system-wide constraint placed on all of this, something called ecological primacy.
This is maybe the most important rule in the whole Constitution. It's not a regulation that could be changed by a new government. It's a foundational, hard-coded law. It states simply, all economic activity must operate within planetary boundaries.
What does that mean in practice, like for a business?
It means the nation's top scientists and ecologists set hard, legally binding caps on things like carbon emissions, biodiversity loss, freshwater usage, and soil degradation. If a business model or an entire industry violates those caps, it's unconstitutional.
It doesn't matter how profitable it is.
It doesn't matter if it creates 1 million jobs.
Yeah.
If it destabilizes the climate, it is illegal. in the same way that selling heroin is illegal. It is fundamentally antisocial.
The document has a sample constitutional article here, and it explicitly says, this article prioritizes long-term ecological sustainability over short-term economic growth. That is a sentence you literally never hear in modern politics.
Never. Because in modern politics, jobs and growth are the ultimate gods that can't be questioned. MSD says growth is good, but a habitable planet is a non-negotiable prerequisite for growth and for life. It forces the economy to fit inside the ecosystem rather than treating the ecosystem as an infinite resource pool and an infinite trash can.
And it treats extreme inequality as another form of pollution, as a destabilizing force.
Yes, they set a national target for the Gini coefficient, a measure of inequality, to be below 0.30. For context, the United States is around 0.48. The famously egalitarian Scandinavian countries are around 0.28 to 0.30.
And they had this very specific, very sharp-edged rule for any company that wants to do business with the government, the 20-to-1 ratio.
This is fascinating. If you want a government contract to build a road, supply software, whatever, which is a huge part of any modern economy, your highest paid employee, usually the CEO, cannot make more than 20 times what your lowest paid full-time worker makes.
20 times. In the U.S. right now, the average is something like 300 to 1.
And in some companies, it's over 1,000 to 1. This one rule would force a massive compression of the wage scale. It basically says to a company, you want to get rich off a taxpayer-funded contract, fine, but you have to bring your workers along with you. It links the fate of the executive to the fate of the janitor.
Which leads us directly to the other side of the ledger. If you are squeezing inequality from the top, what are you doing to build up the bottom? Section 5, the social covenant.
This is the social in MSD. This is the floor, the foundation we talked about. And the key philosophical shift is that they treat basic needs not as charity or welfare, but as inalienable constitutional rights. They call them trumps in the legal documents.
Meaning they trump other considerations.
Meaning they override calculations of pure economic utility. The question is not, can we afford to feed everyone? The starting point is, we are a society that feeds everyone. Now let's budget accordingly. It's a right.
They list 5 guarantees: healthcare, education, housing, food, transportation. Let's look at housing because it's incredibly specific.
The constitutional right is to safe, secure, and dignified housing of no less than 300 square feet per person.
That's basically a studio apartment for a single person.
It is. It's not a mansion.
Yeah.
But imagine that as a constitutional guarantee, not a vague goal, a legally enforceable right. If you are homeless, the state has violated your constitutional rights, and you can sue.
That would require a building program on a scale we haven't seen in generations.
Absolutely. And as we'll see in the Pakistan case study, that is exactly what they plan. But look at the food security guarantee. It's not just calories. It's 2,100 nutritionally balanced calories per day.
It feels a little utilitarian, a little clinical.
It does. But think about the psychological burden it removes from a population. If you wake up every single day knowing that no matter what happens, if you lose your job, if the market crashes, if you get sick, you will have a roof, you will have food, you will have a doctor, and your kids will go to a good school.
Yeah.
What does that do to the human brain?
It lowers the cortisol, for one thing. It removes that constant low-level hum of existential dread. It directly addresses the polycrisis anxiety we talked about at the start.
Exactly. The argument in the documents is that this is the precondition for a truly dynamic and entrepreneurial society. Real freedom isn't just low taxes. Real freedom is freedom from fear. That's what allows people to take risks, to start a small business, to make art, to innovate.
But the skeptic in me and the accountant in me is just screaming, how do you pay for all of this? Universal healthcare, free university, guaranteed housing, that's an immense cost.
The eternal question. The documents are pretty clear on this. They point to a cocktail of 3 major funding streams. 1. The wealth tax on assets over $100 million and the massive compression of inequality we just talked about. More of the economic pie is cycling through the real economy instead of being hoarded.
Okay.
2, the elimination of what they call bad growth, all the economic activity that doesn't actually improve human well-being, like much of the advertising industry, or the financial sector's more speculative activities. Plus, the ecological limits stop hugely wasteful consumption.
And 3.
Sheer efficiency. The argument is that a meritocratic government run by competent people doesn't waste 30 or 40% of its budget on corruption, incompetence, and poorly designed programs.
Yeah.
The bet is that competence pays for itself.
So the theory is a competent government is actually a cheaper government, even if it provides more services.
That is the central bet of the entire system.
Okay. Theory is nice, philosophizing is fun, but does it work in the mud? Does it work in the real world? Section 6 takes this entire, almost sci-fi political structure and drops it into a very real, very complex, very difficult place, Pakistan.
Talk about a stress test. You couldn't pick a harder place to try this.
I was going to ask that. Why Pakistan? Why not start this experiment in, say, New Zealand or Denmark?
Because New Zealand is easy mode. New Zealand is stable, it's wealthy, it's homogenous, it's isolated. The authors say if MSD only works in a paradise like that, then it's a useless theory. They chose Pakistan precisely because it is the hard case.
Let's paint the picture. The baseline year is 2026. Pakistan has a GDP of around $350 billion. It has crippling international debt. It has intense political polarization and a history of instability.
And it is on the absolute front lines of climate change. We're talking catastrophic superfloods one year and deadly, life-threatening heat waves the next.
So it is a country on the brink. The argument is, if MSD can turn Pakistan around, it can work anywhere.
That's the claim.
So February 8th, 2026, a hypothetical implementation begins. What does the Majlisi Shura, the new hybrid legislative assembly, look like on day one?
Well, it looks like Pakistan in a way the old parliament never did. You have your traditional elected politicians from powerful families in Punjab and Sindh, but sitting right next to them are random, lottery-selected citizens. A farmer from Balochistan, a shopkeeper from Karachi, a school teacher from Peshawar.
And the military. In Pakistan, the military is, well, it's not just an elephant in the room. It often owns the room.
Historically, yes.
Right.
And the MSD plan is incredibly bold here. It constitutionally establishes strict, unambiguous civilian supremacy. There is a director of defense on the executive council, but that person is a civilian, confirmed by the assembly. The defense budget is debated and approved line by the assembly.
And it explicitly prohibits active military personnel from holding any political or corporate office.
That is a direct challenge to the existing power structure. It's a very dangerous game to play.
How do they think they can get away with that?
The roadmap acknowledges this is the single biggest hurdle. Phase 1, the first 10 years from 2026 to 2035, is all about stabilizing that relationship. They frame it not as weakening the military, but as professionalizing it. The pitch to the generals is, let us, the technocrats, fix the failing economy and the crumbling infrastructure so you have a strong nation to actually defend. You focus on defense, we'll focus on development.
A grand bargain. And how do they handle the question of religious identity? Pakistan is constitutionally an Islamic republic. Does MSD try to force it to become a secular state?
No, and the documents are clear that would be a catastrophic mistake. This goes to the pillar of cultural self-determination. The identity is preserved. It remains the Islamic Republic of Pakistan. They even maintain a Sharia advisory council.
But the key word there is advisory.
That is the crucial distinction. The council advises the legislature on the compatibility of laws with Islamic principles. But its rulings are not legally binding on the constitutional court. They thread the needle. Respect the faith and cultural identity of the majority, but governed by the evidence-based secular law of the Constitution.
They also propose what they call true federalism, which is a huge issue in Pakistan with its diverse ethnic groups. They want to give the provinces Balochistan, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, Sindh massive autonomy.
This is the reverse burden of proof concept. Currently, the provinces often have to ask the central government in Islamabad for permission to do things. Under MSD, the center has to legally justify why it should intervene in provincial matters like education, language, or local culture.
So the default is local control.
The default is radical devolution of power. If the province of Sindh wants to change its school curriculum to emphasize its own history and language, the federal government can't stop them unless it violates a core constitutional right.
So they have this 30-year roadmap. Phase 1 is foundations and pilot projects in a few districts. Phase 2 is experimental rollouts in volunteer provinces. Phase 3 is the full national implementation. The numbers they project for the year 2056 are, well, they're staggering.
They are transformative if they can pull it off. They project the GDP rising from $350 billion to $1.4 trillion.
That's a fourfold increase in 30 years.
It's a huge leap, but it's not unprecedented. It's comparable to the developmental trajectories of countries like South Korea or what China did in a similar time frame.
They project poverty dropping from 40% of the population to under 5%, and literacy rising from 62% to 98%.
It all hinges on one core assumption, that if you can stop the political chaos, if you can stop swinging the policy pendulum wildly every election cycle and just execute a consistent, confident, long-term plan for 30 years, then the compound interest of good governance will inevitably kick in.
But this all relies on the system not rotting from the inside out. Which brings us to the final piece of the puzzle, Section 7, accountability. The classic question, who watches the watchers? Because if I'm a sortition member, maybe a lobbyist can bribe me. If I'm a meritocrat, maybe I become arrogant and detached from the people.
This is why they call their accountability structure checks and balances on steroids. They don't rely on just one check, like elections. They build in 6 overlapping channels of accountability.
Okay, let's list them. Voters can recall elected officials. That's pretty standard. The courts can prosecute corruption. The media is constitutionally protected to investigate the government. Civil society, NGOs, unions, protests are protected. Those are familiar. But tell me about the last two, the citizen panels.
This is like creating a permanent grand jury made up of regular people chosen by lottery. Their only job is to audit the government. If they get a whiff of corruption in the Ministry of Health, they have the legal power to subpoena documents and compel testimony.
Okay.
They can't jail anyone, but they can release their findings to the public and recommend removal to the legislature.
So you have random citizens with real power watching the experts and the politicians.
And then you have the independent institutions. My favorite is the ombudsman for future generations.
I love this concept. It's so poetic.
It is, but it has real legal teeth. This is an independent office whose sole client is the unborn citizens of the country. This office can sue the current government if it passes a policy that will clearly harm the citizens of, say, the year 2080.
So if you try to pass a budget that just loads up trillions in debt for the next generation to pay off, this ombudsman takes you to court.
Or if you deplete a critical natural resource like an aquifer, it gives a legal voice to the voiceless future. It forces the time horizon of politics to change from what's best for the next election to what's best for the next century.
And there's also an ecological ombudsman.
Similar idea, but this one gives legal standing to nature itself. If a corporation is polluting a river, the river, through the ombudsman's office, has a lawyer and can sue for damages.
It really is a system designed from the ground up to catch failure, corruption, and short-sightedness from every conceivable angle.
That's the goal. It's a constant balancing act between the 3 forces.
Yes.
The many, that's the democracy of elections and the randomness of sortition. The few, that's the competence of the meritocracy. And the one, the coordinating role of the chief executive. But the one is strictly constrained by the other 2.
So we've unpacked the stack. We've seen the lottery, the exams, the social floor, the ecological ceiling, and the Pakistani case study. It is a massive, complex, and deeply ambitious machine.
It is. It's a lot to take in.
But as we close out, I want to go back to that question of bravery we touched on at the start. We know the old world is dying, the 20th century is over, the polycrisis is here, and it's real.
The warning lights on the dashboard are all flashing red.
What MSD offers is a genuine synthesis. It tries to take the best parts of every system, the fairness and legitimacy of democracy, the competence and foresight of technocracy, and the dynamism and efficiency of markets, and weave them together.
While putting hard constitutional checks on the failure modes of each.
The final note in the summary document says this: governance is human craft, not divine revelation. It requires acknowledging trade-offs, embracing uncertainty, and maintaining democratic humility.
That's the key right there. It's not a utopian religion. It's a hypothesis. It's a system designed to be tested, to fail gracefully, and to learn from its own mistakes.
So here's the question we want to leave you with today. And it's a hard one. If we admit that our current systems seem exhausted, that they are failing to meet the challenges of this century, are we brave enough to even consider trying a system where a random lottery might help determine who holds power?
Are we brave enough to let a rigorous, ethics-focused math test decide who runs the economy?
Or is the devil we know, with all of its gridlock and inequality and impending crises, safer than venturing into this unknown fourth architecture?
That, I think, is the fundamental question of our time.
Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.